Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just can I have your attention just for some general safety and information announcements before we start our meeting here at the Great National Hotel in Ballina. So if you can please take note of the emergency exits. There's one in each corner of the room, and in the event of an emergency, please leave the building by those exits nearest to you. If you need any assistance, there are members of the Policing Authority staff in the room, so just let them know. As you will be aware, the event is streamed live and a video recording will be made of the meeting for online broadcast. Everyone just check that your mobile phone is switched off and just be aware that anyone here may be part of that record. Silence at all times from the audience, and if you do need to leave the room during the meeting, please do it quietly. There's a door at the back of the hall and try and do it without disturbing the meeting. As usual, today's meeting is an engagement between the authority and the Garda Commissioner, and you are present to observe. There's no opportunity, as usual, for anyone other than the authority and Garda representatives to participate in the meeting. Thank you very much. Bob.
Die agus fáilte go dtíon cruinniú seo den údar os pólíneachta táid bailithe I méile nátha I gúnta bhío don cruinniú seo an tríú cruinniú imlíana atá rachtáilthe I measc an phobal agus is mór an rud é dúin go bhfuil míad an anna sin dhéanamh agus beidh ceann eile an bhí se cóing I bord láirige rib deir na bliana. Ceantas ná bhainean leis an cúnta sin a go bhfuil ceantar gailteachta inti agus tucha méidir eis chuig go dtíon buinte sin rib deire an cruinnithe. Welcome to this meeting in public of the Policing Authority, the third such meeting this year and a further meeting planned for next month. These are important opportunities for the authority to engage with the Garda Síochána in the context of circumstances of the environment in which we find ourselves. And we had very important engagements yesterday and impressively important engagements yesterday with community organisations. They will know who they are and they will know who their representatives were. And they were very productive. And it has to be said, in the main, very positive about the relationship and engagements they have with the Garda Síochána, which was encouraging. And we had impressive conversations yesterday afternoon with the Garda Síochána here in Ballina, but representing the entire division of Mayo, Roscommon and Longford. Chief Superintendent Ray McMahon welcomed us in the Ballina Garda station and our discussion, and AC Cleena, Assistant Commissioner Cleena Richardson was also with us, and we in particular had very interesting presentations from and conversations with a number of community Garda sergeants and a juvenile liaison officer, and I think it's important that we identify who they were because they were very impressive and interesting and informative for us. Sergeant Sean McHale and Paul Marr and Darren Conlon and Garda Audrey Garvey, and if he could have been there, I'm sure that Sergeant Peter Hanley from Castlebar would have been in the party as well. But as I say, they were productive and valuable conversations, and there was something about the quality of the relationships between the community and community organisations and the Garda Síochána that had a special character about it, and that doesn't happen by accident. And the authority noted that very carefully. Second thing, so our thanks and appreciation for that, both to the community organisations and to the Garda Síochána. The second thing I wanted to say before proceeding to the business that we have scheduled for the meeting and asking authority colleagues to engage with the Garda Síochána on those items is to say that it was a very pleasant thing yesterday to learn that the Central Statistics Office had lifted the reservation that obtained in relation to the publication of crime statistics. This is a very important development, and it is a tribute to the quality of the work that has been done over a number of years within the Garda Síochána in ensuring that this day would be reached, and it's important that it be recognised for the significance that we believe attaches to it. And as I say, it is a tribute to good work well done. So can I move then to the first item? As is usual, when we have authority meetings in local communities, is the issue of responding to local policing challenges, and to ask Debbie Donnelly to lead on this. Thanks, Debbie.
Thanks, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. As the Chair mentioned, we had a really very enjoyable and very detailed and informative engagement, both with members of the community groups, and indeed Garda Síochána staff here in this division. Deputy Commissioner, may I offer an opportunity to talk about the approach to community policing and engagement within this division? And maybe Chief Superintendent might want to take that.
Thanks, Debbie. Yes, I'll hand over to Chief McMahon, who has intimate knowledge of the community policing approach here in the Mayo, Roscommon, Longford division. Ray, please.
Thanks very much, Deputy. I thought in March, when President Biden departed, that I wouldn't find myself under pressure in Ballina again, but no, in truth, I'm delighted to speak to you today about the community policing, how we respond to local policing challenges in the Mayo, Longford, Roscommon division. And I think particularly how we respond to dealing with the vulnerable, the young, the minority, and generally those in need of support and protection. And I know we often hear that, you know, all Gardaí are community policing Gardaí, but we do try to adopt that approach in the Mayo, Longford, Roscommon division, particularly with those Gardaí in uniform. And our first Garda Commissioner, Michael Staines, also a Mayo man, incidentally, he spoke very eloquently about us working with the moral authority as servants of the people. And that's how we approach our community policing here, working very collaboratively with the local communities. We embrace those community policing principles: partnership working, enforcement of the law, crime prevention, the diversity and inclusion, all visible community engagement, and also accountability. We in Mayo, we have found ourselves being at the forefront of initiatives in relation to community policing and pilots that tend to go national, and such as the community safety or the community policing framework, and now we're moving into community safety partnerships as well. So, you know, what we do is we value closely the relationship that we have with the local community, which is very strong. And it's a collective approach with both government and state agencies, charity groups, community groups, and also individuals just willing to help. You know, the engagement of the Joint Policing Committee, they're very good at identifying, highlighting issues for us, you know, and promoting issues with us as well. So, and we have specialist community policing Gardaí, and they spearhead our approach, and they're supported by all our uniformed frontline Gardaí and our specialist units. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And the Chair was, reflected on, I suppose, the tone of what we heard in terms of the richness of the relationships and the authenticity of the relationships, both within the Garda team and between the Garda and community. And as he rightly says, those things don't happen by accident. We heard also that this was an ethos and an approach that for some time in Mayo. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about how that has come about and how you sustain that approach to community policing and engagement.
Yeah, I think, well, the personnel that we have here, really, you know, and with very good supervision, And it's certainly, it's always been an ethos here that, you know, putting communities first, and the Gardaí, it's very much ingrained in them. They really care about the people in their communities. You know, we have spoken about some of the projects that we have. A lot of them are bottom-up led. You know, Sergeant Maher in Ballina, for example, with the digital vulnerable persons register. You know, that was brought about during COVID. Can we map out everybody, all those old people, vulnerable people that need to be visited? We now have that on Gardaí. We will have that on the mobility phone for Gardaí, and it'll be rolling out nationally shortly. And it's that ethos that's fostered in the Gardaí. They themselves are leading that out, obviously supported by management. But I think you'll agree that the personnel that you have met within that community policing, they enjoy giving to the community. They enjoy helping the community, and they certainly take a lot from that themselves, and there's a lot of positivity from them.
And maybe if I could come in as well, just on that point as well, Debbie, and it's just to say, I think Ray gave a very good example there, and I know you saw it, the older persons register, and what Paul and the creation of what he created, and it's a great example of also then how we upscale local initiatives. So you hear a lot sometimes when you're from the national perspective and that top down, and how we work and collaborate and support internally, but that's a really good example of something that happened locally. Paul also won an award. He won an Age Friendly Award, and that the Age Friendly Awards last year, and we're already taking steps that has now moved to the Garda National Community Engagement Bureau, and just on Monday past there we were meeting with ICT about how we upscale that so we can roll that out across the organisation. So I think that's, you know, it's a really good example of how both top down and bottom up.
It's a very good example in terms of sharing good practice across the whole of the organisation. And we did hear also about the approach to, I suppose, the further education of probationary and student officers as well in terms of that ethos, and that was very interesting from the community guards themselves. But we did hear some challenges as well, and some concerns. And one of those concerns was around the visibility of community officers, visibility of policing on streets, and the potential that has to cause concern and fear of crime amongst some of the community. Maybe you could speak to your approach to ensure, you know, and how you ensure maximum visibility of officers on the ground. Thank you.
Yeah, I think some of the key issues there are to ensure that we keep dedicated community policing Gardaí supported by the front line. And I know there has been pressure, and certainly, you know, with the downturn in recruitment up until this stage, there has been pressure maybe to sort of do we have to revert people, so on and so forth. But we're not having that here, and on this division, we've certainly prioritised that frontline image and the front of having people on the front line. And I've no doubt, and has already started as recruitment is flowing through, that we'll be able to commit more and more visibility. But we also have to remember that there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes from other specialist units like domestic violence and sexual assault units, drugs units. These are also huge concerns with the communities. Our victims units, all the various investigations that go on to allow our uniformed Gardaí have more time dealing with the members of the public, dealing with community engagement. And I think as we move into the op model, and we've moved into it for the last year, what we have now are superintendents, teams of inspectors and their own teams, and they're fully dedicated to community engagement issues. That the administrative side of it, the investigative side of it has been taken away from them to allow them to engage with the communities. So we hope that will allow us, and certainly as recruitment comes on board, allow us much more opportunity to get down with the communities and deal with more community issues.
And maybe if I could just add to that as well, that the work then that's being done nationally to support not just here in Ballina, but right across the country as well. So by the end of the year, the plan will be that we will have, you can go into our website into the map, and we will have the email addresses and telephone numbers of all the community policing teams. So each community policing team will have its own email address, obviously for non-emergency calls, and that will be available by the end of the year for anyone to access. So also then for that non-emergency, that people also, we can promote the team and people can contact them for non-emergency calls. And also secondly, we have, and we're really focusing as well, especially for some of the areas like here, the Chief Superintendent in the National Bureau, Communication Bureau, is our fleet of bicycles as well, because for the towns like this and how our guards can be visible around towns. So we're looking at, we've just purchased some community policing vans, which will be allocated across the regions. They'll also have the capability to carry bicycles, and that will allow then those within the regions out into the divisions to be able to use those to be accessible around various locations, and also then have the ability to be able to go around on doing bike patrols as well.
Leads me on to one of the other concerns that were expressed to us, and that was around response times and responding not only to calls but, and in some instances, to correspondence as well. I suppose what we're interested in is how you ensure that balance in terms of responding to calls for help, calls for assistance, and maybe you could say something about some of the expectations on communities and the time taken to respond. And then I'm going to move on to maybe some questions around the op model. So.
Yeah, and obviously it's always a concern of ours, that people are left with an undue delay, that Gardaí for attending scenes, attending incidents, and certainly, the APSFF, the Policing Service for the Future report, there's a lot of initiatives within there. One of the first ones we try to bring in running into the op model is the Garda Safe programme, and that's really designed where we have a coordinated approach to answering calls. And in some cases, it's been portrayed as a car going from one town to another to answer a call. Well, a lot of it is about where are all our vehicles, where are all our personnel, and who can we get to the place first? Who can we get to attend the scene first? Not to leave those victims on their own, unattended. And this also gives us a much more in-depth way of managing and understanding the nature of the calls that we have, because we're really getting more in-depth knowledge of the calls and what we're attending and how long we're attending them for and where the stress points are. So, I would hope that as time goes forward and we all get used to using that system, it'll be much more advantageous.
Thank you, and that sounds very useful type of approach and analysis in terms of call handling. You were one of the first divisions to have, I suppose, the structures of the new operational model in place, and that's a little bit different from the full implementation of the ops model in terms. So can you say a little bit about, tell us a little bit about how that has worked for you in terms of, what advantages, bringing the three counties together and to working within the model has had for you and this area in particular?
Yeah, I certainly think we had the advantage that we had Mayo as a pilot again for that model at a smaller degree, but that would allow us to get some of our support structures such as business services up and running as we went into the full operating model. And there's no doubt about it, it's a large division. But when you look at the structures and the way it's designed, it's about separate sections taking that administrative burden away. We now have a central superintendent in charge of all crime and all crime-related issues. We have a separate superintendent in charge of all our performance and governance and courts, and all of that stuff is now taken away from superintendents, from inspectors. And I think they're the people, and our assistant principals, they're the people who are mainly affected by this. We want to make sure that the guards and sergeants underground are affected by this as little as possible, but that they can deliver that service to the public. So I think it's incumbent on us in management to make sure that happens, and that's what we have to strive for.
sorry. My question is, the difference it has made in communities, the impact, is it, have you noticed the difference that can make?
I think with a lot of change, there's going to be apprehension. And I also think we have to remember within the policing service for the future, there's a lot of change projects, and such as rosters and duty management system, such as our Garda Staff, our investigation management system, and I think what's happening is a lot of this has been brought in, that it's the op model. The op model is one specific initiative within that change process, and really it's just what is changing is changing the management structure to make sure that delivery to the public is delivered. But it's the management structures really that's been changed here. And we certainly have to keep monitoring it, and I don't think for a minute, we're going to have to keep monitoring it and keep adapting it to make sure that service is delivered.
One of the issues, I suppose, in that type of structural change is how you link existing units up with each other. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you've gone about linking up community policing responsibilities across the division, maybe specialists and some of the specialist units across the division. You can say how that's, how that work is progressing, and some of the benefits of that you've assessed.
Yeah, and one of the key aspects of it, and certainly me as a manager, and I always try to emphasise with the team, is that not to get into silos. That we have to remember that this is a team effort. Everybody else is supporting the frontline people on the ground so that they can go out and engage with the communities, and that involves as well about regular our PAF meetings, our performance meetings, and our management meetings to make sure that plainclothes and investigative people are in there at those management meetings with the community engagement personnel. That everybody is aware of what we're trying to achieve, and that is certainly a body of work that is proving quite fruitful. Yeah, and we do try to get across that whole ethos of a team effort.
Within that response, there are quite a number of challenges as well in terms of moving forward. But with those structures now in place, over the next year, 2 years, what are you hoping to achieve in this area for, I guess, for your officers and for the communities?
But ultimately, we're trying to maximise the service delivery. Can we get as many people in the public, keep them as safe as possible, have them as satisfied with our policing response as possible? And that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve.
Have you, one of the things that we've heard, not only here but in this area but elsewhere, that there's a sense in some areas of change fatigue. There's lots going on, lots of changes. Have you sort of been aware or noticed any of that in this division? If so, how have you been addressing that?
I mean, there's no doubt about it. Changes. There's always apprehension with change. There's apprehension not just with members of the Garda Síochána, there's the public, there's the people that we serve. I think the key thing is communication. It's trying to make them aware, and also make them aware of what we're trying to achieve here, so that there's no, there's no hidden agendas, that people are aware of where we're going and the time slots in that, and a lot of this change, and it's to express as well the positivity and the benefits of those change. I mean, for example, we're moving into community safety partnerships in Longford, and that has been so far a very, very successful endeavour. Now, that's really where where we're really making things real in relation to collaborative efforts. There's over 29 groups there working together. There's a foundation. They've gone out to the communities. They've asked them what they want, and they've gone together with a concrete plan of what they want to deliver. And all those groups, they're together now, trying to achieve those aims. It's not just a Garda Síochána going out to try to do something, or somebody else trying to go out to do something. And that relates to a lot of our vulnerable people, a lot of our drugs issues, a lot of our quality of life issues that you have within communities, the things that people want addressed. So a lot of this change is going to be very good, and it's going to be, and that those community safety partnerships, there are very strong members from joint policing committees with great experience on those, and they support us very strongly as well. Yeah.
And we know that Longford is a pilot area for community safety partnerships. How's that working out in terms of policing? And how do you find working with that partnership and the benefits that that brings and has the potential to bring?
Yeah, I think Longford is an ideal place to have piloted something like that. I mean, in Longford, 20% of the population of Longford would have been born outside of Ireland. We have a very vibrant travelling community. The issues that would have in Longford would have in a lot of areas throughout the country. And there's a lot of diversity in Longford. But the Community Safety Partnership, there is a lot of groups that are there to support the individual groups. And the Community Safety Partnership ties them all together to work together to see are the communal goals that we can achieve. So it's proving very successful. And it's in its very early years, and I don't want to preempt reports that might come out, but certainly my experience and from discussing it with the community policing Gardaí on the ground and local management is that they're very, very satisfied with it. It's not the Gardaí now trying to solve a problem on their own, because these problems have to be collaborative.
Thank you, and it is very useful to hear, your experiences of coming to this division, what has happened in the past, couple of years, all that change, but also your reflection on, some of the changes that still have to happen, and also where you're aiming for in terms of the potential benefits of the future, but also the awareness of some of the challenges that you face and also what you've heard from the community. So thank you very much. Thanks, Deputy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here, and I'd just like to echo the comments of Bob and Debbie about how delightful it was yesterday to meet the members of staff who are a credit to you in their energy and enthusiasm and creativity and their relational approach. A relational approach is something that I believe very strongly in, and Chief Superintendent McMahon, you just mentioned there the benefits so far of the partnership approach to community safety in Longford. It can also, though, be very challenging working together in a multi-agency way. Have there been any learning so far in terms of the challenges?
Well, I think the key learnings, I think first and foremost, it's set up with the support, obviously, of the local council, but also there's dedicated people there to coordinate it.
Okay.
And it's very important that they're the right people doing the right job. And we're fortunate we have very good people there, really good people there, very dedicated. And I think that's really what's made this work, and they've been very enthusiastic from the start. And I think that's really what's proved successful, and that's the key learning from this. I think all the people that are there, all the community groups are there, they're waiting to help. And they just need it all to be tied and coordinated.
Thank you.
Maybe if I could just add to that as well, just as I have the strategic sponsorship of the community safety partnerships as well, and just to add to what we see, Longford was the first partnership to issue their community safety plan. So they, of the three, all three now have, Waterford and Dublin North and City, all now have the community safety plans. There is an evaluation being undertaken currently by the Department of Justice, and we have taken part in that as well. So yes, there are, undoubtedly there have been learnings and the preparation and the establishment of them and the membership. But again, I think one of the positive learnings as well is that each is designed and the membership reflects those areas and the local policing needs of those areas. Chief Superintendent Ray talked about that, about how Longford and how it's so representative. So yes, there's a lot of work ongoing. We meet actually monthly internally to ensure that we have a consistent approach to the community safety partnerships, and that's very important. So we've designed, for example, we have taken feedback from each of the three partnerships. We have designed our reporting template from the policing perspective, and it has received now very positive feedback from all 3 partnerships, and we've worked closely with ICT and the analysis service. So what we have created is something that we can upscale when the national rollout, anticipating the new legislation and ultimately a national rollout of that. So all the work we're doing now as well is capturing our own learning. The department are doing it formally as the lead, but we're also ensuring that, and very much how as well, that the local superintendent, I think we've heard to say as well, Ray, isn't it, with a division the size of Ray's is the role of the chief superintendent, and very much how also local superintendents then locally are the local contact with those community safety partnerships.
Thanks very much. And Ray, so you mentioned the importance of having the right people involved. And we had a discussion around this as well yesterday, that you don't want people who don't really want to be there, and you also need the right people from all the other partner agencies in the room. So if an issue around housing or whatever it is crops up, that you can deal with it effectively. Are you confident that all the right people and all the relevant agencies are involved at this point, or are there any notable gaps?
I think what they're finding as they go forward, that there's more and more agencies that they need to assist when they're drilling down into the details of how they solve problems. And certainly, yeah, it's been a different time scale for buy-in from different agencies or different bodies. But everybody around that table wants to help, and everybody around that table wants to contribute. And I certainly think, when it's been led as well from the council, I think also the elected representatives can be very good and strong in getting people on board, if there's issues in relation to that. And that's where we talk about collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Recently, the heads of the court service and TUSLA have commented about the impacts of resourcing issues on discharging their own functions. Have the Gardaí noticed any negative impacts in this regard in their engagements, let's say with TUSLA or other partner agencies?
Maybe I'll take that from the national perspective. So I suppose interagency working at any time is challenging. And different agencies, I suppose, at different times may experience, particular challenges. But I suppose we always find a way to communicate, and I suppose that's where the good relationships that Ray has referenced in the context of Mayo, Roscommon, Longford, but they're right around the country. And at times when resources are stretched, those good relationships really come into their own in the context of being able to, I suppose, pick up the phone to the right person to get things moving, or to solve a problem. So I don't think there's any agency in the country that would say that they have sufficient resources, to do everything that we all want to do, but through prioritisation and a can-do attitude, we can achieve a lot.
Thank you very much. I have just one further question. In relation to some of the excellent engagement we had yesterday with the community groups, there was a sense that perhaps there was a need for a wider awareness of trauma, not just in the specialist units dealing with domestic violence and sexual violence, but for frontline staff in general. And in relation to your mission on keeping people safe, this also involves keeping small children safe so that they can grow up to be healthy, to have a normal development, to be able to learn, to be able to trust authority figures, to be able to relate well, to I suppose, meet their potential. So I'm just wondering, in terms of collaboration, whether you've any ideas at this point on the value of trauma-informed community building efforts. I'm aware of a few that are proposed around the country, including one that might be Garda-led. Are there merits in everyone, from early years, from doctors, for teachers, from Gardaí, all housing, having a trauma-informed approach and understanding stress and the nervous system.
Paula, do you want to take that? Yes, thank you. Yes, certainly, both from that protective services aspect, but also the work that our juvenile liaisons do, the juvenile liaison officers undertake, and the work, from your report of the What We Heard report, and we've been reflecting on that and how on what we heard. So. The JLOs already get that training, and I think that's reflective sometimes in what you're telling us about what you hear from them. So there is a piece of work ongoing at the minute as well about how that could be upscaled. It is also a cross-sectoral piece of work through the cross-sectoral strategy. We've looked at what court service have done about and this is to try and raise that awareness on a sort of organisational perspective to really upscale it. So certainly that is being scoped at the minute. We are sending 3 people on that to see to really give their views and evaluation of that type of course. It got over 90% positive feedback from court service when it was run there. So we're going to send someone from our college, an operational guard, and somebody from the National Bureau, because it's sitting under myself at the minute. So it's at that scoping stage, but certainly I think it is. I think if you look at that understanding of both the trauma-informed practice, I think of the positive feedback you give us about the JLOs who have received that training. So I think it's what will it look like for us to upscale that as well. So that's certainly, that work is ongoing.
Thank you very much.
If I may add, so in the context of the new bill, the whole area of vulnerability is going to come into sharp focus really, and one of our business areas, organised and serious crime, who's the AC in charge of that, also has responsibility for assessing vulnerability in the context of various areas across the organisation, and there are a number identified already, and that's still a work in progress. So I think into the future, that whole area that you speak about will come very much to the fore and will be part of that, both, I suppose, multi-agency, but also for AGS in the context of our approaches as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. There's one item that hasn't been firmly on the agenda that, not been on the original agenda, but that we believe strongly has to be part of this engagement in public between the authority and the Garda Síochána. It has now been placed in the public domain that the Garda Síochána is dealing with what we believe to be, and I'm sure what you consider to be, a serious and important and disturbing development whereby there has been the circulation, the apparently widespread circulation within the Garda Síochána of messages which have been entirely inappropriate, abusive messages about people. I won't mention their names for obvious reasons, but in one case, apparently simply because somebody was representing their members and doing what they believed was appropriate in that context, and in another, utterly false and groundless accusations made against a serving officer, widely and rapidly, it would appear, circulated within the organisation. In this instance, both of these people are women, but we know too that the Commissioner himself, who, as we know, can't be with us today, and you are acting Commissioner of the Garda Síochána in the Commissioner's absence. The extent to which this has happened, the speed and apparent recklessness with which these messages have been distributed, caused the Commissioner to direct that a communication be issued to all Garda personnel, insisting that people desist from circulating such messages. And we welcome the fact that direct and early action was taken. Policing is built on evidence and respect and trust, and none of those seem to have been present in these cases. And one has to wonder, where is the code of ethics? Where is the requirement under Section 7 of the Garda Síochána Act to vindicate the human rights of every individual? We will return to this question in future, and we will be looking for clear evidence and reassurance for the public that action has been taken and that this kind of utterly inappropriate behaviour can be stopped. People will be forgiven for thinking, if this is what they do to their own, how can we expect that they behave towards others? And it comes in such a direct contrast to the quality of the engagements with the community in this division and in other divisions that we have been talking about just now, and of which we found such impressive direct evidence yesterday. We want to be able to promote public confidence in policing. It's part of our statutory responsibility, and we do, but this makes it more difficult. And I simply wanted to make those, if you like, opening observations in relation to this as a reflection of the seriousness with which the authority, and we are very happy to know that a comparable, even greater seriousness is attached to it by the Commissioner and you and all of the other colleagues in the senior leadership of the organisation. And Elaine Byrne is going to engage with some lead into questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on what the Chair was saying, is it a concern to you that members of Garda Síochána are engaged in behaviour, as outlined by the Chair, that is the sharing of information on WhatsApp about information that is offensive, false, inappropriate, unacceptable, malicious, given that members of Garda Síochána themselves are often tasked with investigating such unacceptable behaviours?
Absolutely, and I concur fully with the Chair's comments. They're in line with our own thinking and our own, I suppose, abhorrence at the wide circulation of those text messages, WhatsApp messages. So we've taken that very seriously. Obviously, a communique has issued to everyone in the organisation. We've also referred the matter to our anti-corruption unit from an investigative perspective. And, you know, I suppose it's a very offensive and very hurtful thing for anybody to be subject of false and, I suppose, insensitive, inaccurate messages. And to think that anybody within Garda Síochána would feel that it's okay to circulate those messages is completely unacceptable, completely unacceptable. And I suppose if any of us were in the shoes of the person receiving those messages, I think we would feel likewise. And I suppose it's we're all private individuals. You know, when we go home, we close the door, but the phone messages you can still see. So you're actually like, it's a very vulnerable position to be in, and a helpless position to be in, when you can't control the circulation or indeed the content. And you're the victim of that. So,
Deputy Commissioner, what you're describing really is bullying behaviour.
Well, yes, you could. Yeah, that's a way of describing it. And I suppose it's important to say, and you know, I hope I'm right in saying this, that the vast majority of people in the organisation would be appalled to hear of any of their colleagues doing this. And so those that are engaging in it, it's just completely unacceptable, and that's why we're so determined and taking such a serious stance in relation to it. And I suppose there's that whole area of psychological safety, and when is that? And we, like, everybody's entitled to be in a work environment where psychological safety can be present. So that's an area that we're going to look at, and in the context of organisational policy as well. We don't have a policy currently in relation to that, but I suppose the recent events have brought that whole area into sharp focus, and yeah, it's not a pleasant place to be.
Are you of the view, Deputy Commissioner, that there'll be consequences for this behaviour?
So an investigation has commenced. So we will have to let that take its course. And so I suppose I can't answer that question definitively, but the intention would be that we will establish where this originated and who was engaged in its continuous circulation.
As the Chair has outlined, the two individuals in An Garda Síochána who were the focus of this behaviour were female members, and I just want to touch upon that for a moment. At a recent meeting with the HR management team, the policing authority were told that within the last decade, just 8 female members of An Garda Síochána made a formal complaint of sexual harassment. That to me seems like a remarkably low figure, especially given controversies in other jurisdictions. For example, in the Casey review, in the Met found that the Met were misogynistic. A member of An Garda Síochána was found guilty recently of harassing 2 female An Garda Síochána colleagues. So do you consider that figure of just 8 female members making a formal complaint in the last 10 years a realistic figure?
No, I don't. I would say that we are now more acutely aware of, because of events that you referenced and other internal investigations, of the prevalence of sexual harassment and harassment in general. And I suppose that's why the likes of the anti-corruption unit and other mechanisms that are in place to encourage reporting and provide that opportunity for people to feel confident in reporting, that they will be listened to, they will be believed, and the matters will be investigated. So that's the very strong message from the organisation to every individual, whether it's sexual harassment or otherwise. And again, just to state that any kind of harassment has no place in the Garda organisation, and you know, it's incumbent on us as senior managers to ensure that that we support those who report, but also to create an atmosphere that is conducive to reporting, and that's certainly the track we're on. I don't know, Shauna, do you want to add anything there?
I just wanted to ask a clarifying question, if you don't mind, only because I wasn't at the meeting that you're referencing. HR oversees complaints made by staff, but not members. So was that number inclusive of all of them? Because I think...
Yeah.
It was. Okay. Let me take that away. What I would say, though, is to just support what Deputy McMahon is saying in terms of it just not being acceptable. We do have a new policy on this as of about 2.5 years ago. So I think there is more awareness around it. But in the context of what we're talking about today, I think of all of the people who aren't involved in this, you know, other personnel, and how they must feel about what happens if you step out, what happens if you make a complaint, because this kind of behavior is a way of ostracizing people and making them feel terrible, because it's, you know, false information that is being disseminated about you. it's really about attacking your character in a way that is baseless and false. And so I do think that from a psychological safety point of view, it impacts whether or not people feel comfortable coming forward in any capacity. And I think that's the issue that we need to deal with, because it's not acceptable.
Well, the figures would suggest that members aren't comfortable in coming forward because the figures are so low. So what measures, apart from stating that people must be made comfortable to come forward, what measures can you practically do to ensure that female members or other people who've been victimised within the force feel that they can come forward?
Well, we have new measures in place, such as the ability to call an anonymous hotline, one within the organization and one outside of the organization. So if that's a way that people can be more comfortable, even the presence of the anti-corruption unit, which is only about 2.5 years old, is an opportunity that didn't exist. So it's really a work in progress, and more opportunities are coming forward. I would say that in terms of the number of people who contact us internally in the anti-corruption unit through various forums has increased year over year. And so I think those are metrics that we look at to see, are people feeling more comfortable? And that is a trajectory that we'd want to continue to see, because the absence of a complaint, actually, particularly around important issues like this, is always concerning, in the sense that we believe it's probably happening to a greater degree, and we're not capturing it. People aren't coming forward.
And just to change tack slightly, in the last month there's been a number of Gardaí who've been before the courts and who've pleaded guilty for a number of behaviours, including public drunkenness, threatening and abusive behaviour, harassing female colleagues of Garda Síochána, as I've mentioned, and another individual assaulting 3 people over a period of a decade or more. How can the public? Can you tell us today how the public can be reassured about the person that they meet in Garda Síochána is not an individual who is going to present with such behaviours? It is concerning that these are just 3 individuals who've pleaded guilty, but there are a number of others whose cases are before the courts.
Yeah, I think what's important is that the vast majority of personnel within Garda Síochána are good people, and these are rare cases. This intersects with why our suspension list is higher. We do have these serious kinds of incidents now being reported and dealt with. And so I hope that the public would take comfort from the fact that they are being reported and investigated and dealt with, and that they would feel comfortable that if anything happened in a way that they felt was unprofessional, and that's a very wide umbrella, that they would feel comfortable then contacting someone else within Garda Síochána, or indeed going through Transparency Ireland and doing so in a confidential way, so that we could act on it, and we would want to.
In relation to one of those individuals who pleaded guilty for behaviour that was entirely unacceptable for a member of Garda Síochána, that individual then tendered his resignation, and that resignation appears to have been accepted. Why was the resignation not refused?
Legally, we are not able to refuse a resignation. So that is a matter that we're looking into. But if somebody, it's not a matter of accepting it or not accepting it. If someone resigns, they have the right to resign. Can
you understand the concern of the public seeing that somebody is before the courts, some behaviour that they have been found, serious behaviour they've been found guilty of, and on your CV, tendering your resignation is a very different thing to being sacked for inappropriate behaviour?
Yes, I share those concerns, and these are things that we are speaking with the Department of Justice about with respect to the new bill. These are things that we hope can be dealt with by way of new regulations in terms of how we're looking at discipline and these issues. You're right. Thank you.
So I have more questions, Chair. Just one more question. While we're on discipline, can you tell me the role of the appeals board?
Well, the appeals board is to legally review what the original discipline board determined and make an assessment both with respect to the findings and with respect to any kind of discipline that's been meted out.
At the last Policing Authority meeting, the Commissioner outlined his concern about how his recommendations in certain instances for members of An Garda Síochána to their position as An Garda Síochána to be terminated was overturned by the appeals board, and he is now in circumstances as an Commissioner of An Garda Síochána with certain members who he does not have trust in, which of course is a concern to members of the public. And these were decisions that the appeals board made. Can you provide any update in that regard in terms of the regulations and the powers of the Commissioner in that regard?
It's a systemic issue, and I just want to say, natural justice is very important, and we certainly respect that. But there are systemic issues, and we're not talking about one case. We're talking about a pattern which has been, we've had it reviewed, in fact, by external legal counsel. So there's a couple of things. One, we're having training for all of our boards in November. So it's a 2-day training, which is going to be quite comprehensive. And that doesn't just include people within An Garda Síochána. It will include solicitors and barristers who sit on those boards as well. I think it's such a niche area of the law that it's very important to have these training sessions, and as in-depth as it's going to be over the course of 2 days, because decisions are live and they continuously change. So we constantly have precedent-setting decisions. The other thing is that, again, with respect to the new regulations, which have not been finalized, that these are systemic issues that we have put forward as areas of concern that need to be considered.
You mentioned the training in November. Who sits on the appeal board? What's the composition of the appeals board?
So it's the chair of the board would be a member of either a solicitor or barrister. It's from a list that's determined, and the list sits with the Department of Justice. And then there will be a senior officer from An Garda Síochána, and then there will be a member of the association to which the person who is being represented sits. So for example, if it's an inspector, then there'll be someone from AGSI sitting as the third person.
And are there any proposals in the new regulations to change the composition of the board?
Yes, I know it's being considered. I don't know where that will land, but I know that that's been a discussion and it's being considered.
And my final question, can you give me any update in relation to the process of seeking legal advice in relation to the preferring of charges? Do they rest with An Garda Síochána or do they rest with the panels?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Can you give me an update with regard to the process of seeking legal advice in relation to the, I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, the preferring of the charges? So do these rest with An Garda Síochána rather than the panels?
Oh, you mean criminal charges when they're being considered?
Mm-hmm.
They sit with the DPP.
No, the preferring of the charges within the disciplinary boards, the appeal boards.
Who presents it, I think.
I'm
Preferring.
sorry. Yes,
it's a term for who presents it to
you.
the
I
appeal
haven't heard
board.
it in that context. Thank you. I thought you meant preference. Okay. Yes, there. So there are solicitors and barristers on the other side. So the member will be represented generally by a legal firm, often a legal team. There is no one from An Garda Síochána who then is set to present.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just 2 quick follow-up questions on that issue that the chair raised earlier and that Elaine spoke about as well. I wonder, could you tell us, Commissioner, do you have an idea at this stage as to the number of serving members who were involved in the dissemination of this material?
Not at this stage. It's still very much a work in progress in terms of trying to, I suppose, follow the evidence trail. So no, not at the minute.
Okay. But presumably in the fullness of time, that's something that you'll be able to report to us?
Well, that would be our objective, absolutely.
Okay. And then secondly, is it possible that some of these messages were transmitted using Garda-issued mobile devices?
So the Garda mobility devices have two sides to them, as it were. So there's the work side and there's the private side. In the work side, you cannot use WhatsApp. In the private side, you can. So, so in answer to your question, it is possible.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And does the fact of that possibility, Commissioner, give you cause, or is it too early in the process to reflect on whether it's appropriate that these outlets, social media applications, are available on a Garda-issued mobile device, which is primarily intended for official purposes?
Yes, Chair. We've discussed this with respect to other cases as well. The challenge is that there is a right to privacy to the personal side of the phone. We have a device that is divided for ease of access for members to use. And if we were to reconsider that, then we would wind up potentially with people having two phones, depending on what it is that they're doing. But I can tell you it's been certainly a live discussion with respect to other cases as well. And the challenges around, you're issued a device certainly to use for work, but actually you're issued half a device to be used for work. Half of the device is actually to allow you to have it for personal matters.
I don't for a moment propose to question the right to privacy of people, dearly won and long may it be protected. But there seems to be something out of alignment if a publicly funded, officially provided device primarily for the purpose of undertaking policing duties, extremely valuable in the conduct of those policing duties, can, however, be used and the veil of secrecy or right to privacy invoked to transmit messages of these kind.
No, I understand. It's as I said, this has been discussed with the mobility project from the beginning, and the challenge is, do you expect people to carry two devices, or do you give them access to a portion of a device which you know is for business and another portion of the device which is separated from that? So I can assure you the conversation will continue, because I don't think we've ever reached agreement on it. And this has highlighted certainly one of the challenges with that.
It might at least be worth considering whether in the use of an officially provided device for personal and therefore private communications, that, to put it mildly, the greatest of care should be taken to ensure that nothing that would challenge, contradict with, be out of accordance with the values and principles of the Garda Síochána be communicated through that.
Absolutely. There's no reason for people to have engaged in this behavior, period. Even if it was on a personal phone, the fact that it would be potentially done on an Garda Síochána phone is, to your point, even more upsetting.
Two final quick points in relation to this. Don't necessarily suggesting an answer, but the first is that there will be cases, it seems to me, where the nature of the misbehavior or inappropriate behavior or wrong behavior makes the ability to tender a resignation seem like a luxury that isn't merited by the person, and where other action might be much more appropriate, simply as an indication of the organisation's view of what has happened. And the second is that the circulation of these messages, which have been the foundation of this conversation, and thank you both for the openness with which you've dealt with it, hasn't been confined to serving members, as I understand it, that retired members may have been part of this. And while retired members can constitute a really valuable resource for the organisation, widely distributed across the country, there appear to be some who feel a right and a duty almost to pontificate in all matters, not always founded on facts or not remotely in touch with contemporary policing realities, but who nonetheless find audiences and find a way to well, pontificate is as good a word as any. It's not within your gift to control the rights of now liberated citizens who are retired members, but it is tedious to observe it, to put it at its mildest. Thank you for those engagements, and we move on to the next section of the agenda, which is policing performance, and Anthony Harbins is going to begin with roads policing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, sadly, it's been a difficult year for fatalities on our roads. They've been quite high. I'm just wondering if you're satisfied that the organisation has sufficient resources, both in terms of people and technology, to actually meet the demands of road policing going forward.
Good afternoon and thank you. So I'll hand over to AC Hillman, who leads out on this area, is the strategic lead for it. But just to say, I suppose you're right, this year has been a horrendous year for fatalities. Behind each one of those fatalities is a family, friends, community, and indeed for our own members as well, attending those fatalities, some of which have just been horrendous. So so there are challenges across the board in this regard. So I suppose in terms of the resources, you know, we have our traffic corps. There are one or two areas who are down slightly, but in general the numbers are holding strong. And it isn't always necessarily the areas where there is a reduction in the roads policing where the most fatalities are. So there's a bit of a, you know, an anomaly there. In terms of technology, I think that's one of the areas that that there's a lot more to be done if we're to look at international best practice, international experience indeed, in terms of changing driver behaviour and how technology can inculcate behaviour in a positive way. And I think that's a road that I suppose both AGS and other government departments as well need to come together, and Paula is leading out on some of those multi-agency and cross-departmental engagements. We have our Go Safe vans. They're very helpful. There are limitations in the context of locations where they can park themselves, and you know, a lot of the fatalities are happening on secondary roads, and they're not always conducive to parking up for the Go Safe vans and all that sort of thing. So, look, it's multifaceted, really, I suppose, the challenges. But certainly, driver behaviour is a huge cause of concern for us, and enforcement, engagement, technology all play a huge part in that. So, Paula, will you outline some of the work we're doing with our partners, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy. Yes, certainly, really, suppose the strategic oversight of this sits with the government road safety strategy, and I'm actually the vice chair of the board that oversees implementation of the recommendations. So we have some individual recommendations, and then we have other multi-agency recommendations that we need to implement. You know, I think when we look at resources, the Deputy has said that if you look at all our specialisms in Garda Síochána, roads policing is the one that is the highest resource. So you as an authority also are looking at economic crime, you're looking, I understand, protective services. So it has that highest resource. And I think also the thing about roads policing as well is, and we've heard it earlier from the Chief, from Ray, that with community policing and the front line, you know, I really also need to acknowledge the work that our frontline regular members and community policing teams do as well in terms of road safety. And I've said to you before that when we look at the high level numbers, 25% of roads policing enforcement detections are undertaken by frontline members, and that's reversed for drink and drug driving. So the drink and drug driving detections, 75% are detected by frontline members. So I can understand, and I can understand why many partners and people raise the numbers in roads policing, but I think we need to look at it wider than solely that, because it's also then the equipment, the training, what we're doing with those who have the specialism, but equally the work that we are doing right across the organisation. And indeed, even some of our drugs teams as well, actually in the drugs devices, we're using the new drug devices, use that. As the Deputy had said, some of the areas that we're looking at in terms of technology, I think it would be right just to highlight again our own mobility, you know, and what we've done with the FCN and members being able to input FCNs directly at scenes, and that's been very helpful. But also in terms of that wider technology, then actually yesterday and today there's partners and some of our own people have went over to Scotland to look at their very similar in size, jurisdictionally quite similar, and looking at what the safety camera network looks like there. So there are many more average speed static as well as static speed cameras and a combination of safety camera vans. As you're aware, currently we have solely safety camera vans and then 2 average speed cameras, one in the M7 and one in the Port Tunnel. So I do think there's great opportunity, and I think also to really emphasise this is about changing behaviours and slowing people down. We know where these safety cameras are deployed, that it slows people down. We see it from our evidence here as well on both the M7 and Port Tunnel. So I think there's opportunity for that. And I know both the Minister of Transport and Justice, who I meet regularly through this work, you know, that is certainly being very actively looked at in that cross-departmental work there as well. So I think that's very positive. Again, there's some other roads policing or traffic management issues I think we can look at, which are sitting with the NTA, looking at, and this is primarily I suppose in cities or towns, bus lane enforcement, how technology could be used for that. So some of the more traffic management responsibilities, how the other either local authorities or they can be policed or managed without always the input of Garda Síochána. So that's another project of work. And then I think finally one of the more transformational, and again I know it stimulates much debate, and again it's just at discussion stage. Some countries in Europe actually use safety cameras for mobile phone use and seatbelt enforcement as well. So Spain, Madrid have that, others don't. So again, there's those opportunities as well. But everything, there's a very collaborative approach in the Road Safety Partnership with both the Road Safety Authority and all the partners in this area to see, because we all, as the Deputy has said, it's been a tragic year. Road deaths are up. We see firsthand, both through our family liaison officers, our forensic collision investigators, and the work that we do with many of those organisations that support those families, the impact that has. And so we want to reverse the trend. And actually, it's unfortunate. We're seeing this right across Europe and neighbouring countries as well. Coming out of COVID, road deaths are increasing. So it is something that there's an absolute commitment to reverse this and go back, because ultimately the government strategy is Vision Zero by 2050. So
Yes, and it's a great strategy, and hopefully we can get there, but it is certainly a challenging time. I mean, my own personal experience of this area is that the average speed cameras, as you've had on the M7, are very good because it measures people over a very long distance, whereas you mentioned the static cameras, particularly in Scotland. You know about them, but so does every driver. And what happens is they slow down within a quarter of a mile of it, and then they speed up a quarter of a mile after it. And then, so you're reducing it at black spots, perhaps.
Yeah.
But the problem is you're not overall impacting on the speed that people are driving at. So going back to the point that the Deputy made there at the start, an awful lot of the fatalities have been on minor roads rather than major or national roads. And I'm just wondering, has that trend impacted on the services and the approaches that you're taking to actually fulfill the strategy?
Oh, undoubtedly. I think it is very much, and the meetings that we do have with partners, it is what is the information telling us, and how do we change those responses. But there are some things that are staying quite static. Some of the changes we saw last year, we saw a more significant increase in older drivers. And when I say older drivers, I mean people 65 and over, 60, even 60 and over. This year, we've seen that increase in passengers, and a lot of passengers and younger people as well. So what we do in terms of anything, both the road safety, who are the primary lead in terms of doing the media programs as well, is what are the trends we're seeing this year. But unfortunately, that 80 and 100 km/h roads, that stays quite static. It's roughly, it varies somewhere in the 70s, but up to 70 to 80% normally, it's that road. Again, the high figure of males killed on the road. So there are things that actually do stay quite static. And so it has. So even in terms of both how we're deploying, and the chief here, I'm sure, who both worked in the National Roads Policing Bureau with me as well and is now operational, in terms of how we task our roads policing. So we do an operational plan, and then each of the divisional officers, so Ray will have a plan then on the national level. These are the lifesaver offences we want you to focus on, and then the tasking is done locally at divisional level. So they will be using their local knowledge of those roads to ensure that roads policing are focused on those roads. In terms of even the additional hours for the Go Safe contract that we have, we are utilising them. Again, we've prioritised the top 7 areas where the fatalities are the highest. So we're using the additional money and the additional finance we're getting to target the areas where, unfortunately, this year, and Mayo is one of them, where they will see the additionality as well. So we're very much focused on that, and what is happening, and what are we seeing as well. So yes, it does, and it very much to ensure that we are putting our the right resources in the right places at the right times.
Speed is obviously one of the greatest factors involved in this, but distracted driving, you've already mentioned bus lanes and cycle lanes, and there has been an increasing proportion of the fatalities have been both pedestrian and cyclists. And again, I'm wondering, other than just speed and dealing with speed, what sort of issues you've been looking at and how you've been maybe approaching those particular demands?
Yes, so just yesterday we did our media coverage. We did the launch of this bank holiday weekend, so in line with every bank holiday, and myself and the CEO of the RSA and the Minister. And undoubtedly, yes, because we have seen that increase in pedestrians killed as well, 38 this year to date. And what's also worrying, coming into this time of year, with 43 pedestrians killed last year, but half of them were killed in the last 3 months of the year, in October, November, December. So we're actually coming in to one of the most worrying times of the year. So what we have, and what we were doing yesterday as well, is very much with that message, of encouraging people to wear fluorescent jackets, that using lighting for everyone to be seen, and everyone very much that shared responsibility of looking out for one another on the roads. This is also something that we very much use our own education, as well as RSA have a responsibility for education, but we as well have retained we've retained quite a bit of that. So we have our schools program that sits under community policing guards going under the schools program. So there's both education and that. And then just last week we rolled out nationally our Lifesaver project, which is a project that started in Limerick in 2006 and had been running in Limerick County since that period of time. And it is quite a hard-hitting, impactful set of videos, but also intermittent with roads policing guards, or can be community guards, but roads policing guards then talking to the audience. It's aimed at audiences of transition year 5 and 6, 15 years and above, but also for adults as well. So part of that messaging to really to raise that awareness of people's the impact of and it does cover various methods of transport, but including pedestrians, includes everything. And certainly it's something that I'd be very keen if the authority would wish to see that. We were very happy to give you that presentation. And what we did in rollout, when I say rollout of it nationally, what that means and what that looks like is that we brought together the divisional officers, nominated people in their division who, again, the people who would have that skill going into schools, youth clubs, any area of work as well. Businesses have it. Businesses have asked for this presentation. So we now have over 100 Gardaí briefed and have the necessary IT and the memory sticks and whatever to go out to deliver that nationally. So we have over 100, all led by Sergeant Tony Miniter, who started the project in Limerick.
Maybe then, just bearing all of that in mind, In terms of legislation, do you think you have sufficient powers to actually deal with the challenges that you're facing on roads, or is there any prioritisation of legislative change that you would like to see going forward?
Well, I know that there are some legislative changes that the Minister has announced, and we equally then will be working with them to implement them. I think the fact that the mandatory testing of for drugs after road traffic collisions, I know it's something both our own members, but a lot of the representative groups like Irvine Park have mentioned as well. So I know that would be welcome. But I think that I think the penalty points, I think that is something for the government. But in terms of our enforcement and our responsibility to this, I think that we are totally committed. We are committed to ensuring that we make the maximum use of that significant resource. It's like it's 5% of our organisation that we have allocated to roads policing. And I do think, but the end-to-end process, we talked about earlier average speed cameras and static cameras, whatever you decide. But again, we can't look at that in isolation, because actually the impact on the court service, and it's something the CEO of the court service discusses with us, and we know, because if we introduce those, then the impact on courts and the whole process. So it's very much an end-to-end process, and I think that's something as we go into 2024 is the work that will be very much focused on.
I was also focusing on just the time of year that we're approaching.
Yep.
Christmas always is a great time for lots of things, but young people getting things like e-scooters, scramblers and stuff like that without training, without any proper protective equipment, and suddenly being on roads. I'm just wondering, again, in those areas, are you comfortable that you have the capacity to actually deal with these sorts of issues? Because they are becoming much more common, actually, and seeing these people on roads.
Yeah, I mean, there's various areas, there's various work streams that link into those. So even, there is actually a scrambler subgroup that Minister Brown chairs under the Antisocial Behaviour Forum, and the Community Engagement Bureau are represented in that. So with that aspect of work, and I just saw this morning, the success that our colleagues in Limerick had in terms of an operation they did against the antisocial use of scramblers, and seized 44 scramblers. So there's both that aspect. So there's work being done in that area as well. There's lots of preparatory work ongoing. In terms of the introduction of the legislation for e-scooters as well. So we are represented on the Department of Justice's group in that. The department themselves will be leading on the public awareness campaign for that, but we very much in the background, we have been getting our own processes in place to both have the necessary offences listed and just all the logistics in the background. But we are seeing that, and unfortunately overnight, we have seen one person killed and another person seriously injured, both who have been riding e-scooters. So there is work in this area, and also informing our own members of the new legislation that is coming in. There's a lot of work the Road Safety Authority have done in this as well, and what they are doing very much is actually engaging with a lot of other countries in Europe who are at different stages. They have actually had e-scooters for a period of time and are actually changing their approach. We are only about to introduce them, so it is something we'll be watching. We will be looking at very carefully. But there is, even again under the road safety strategy and that partnership approach of saying, what's the impact, what will be the impact if we do have, and I'm anticipating that will be happening, rental of them in towns and cities. So I'm certainly it is something we'll be revisiting with you, but we're preparing for it and in time for the new legislation coming in.
Thank you. Thank you. Finally, again, you've mentioned the work you do around bank holidays, and obviously we're coming up to one this weekend, and then Christmas with the festive season, dark nights and everything else, and both pedestrians and sometimes drivers drinking a bit too much and getting themselves into difficult positions where they create accidents and fatalities. Is there any final messages you would like to take the opportunity to get across at this stage?
Yes, certainly, and we are preparing and really nearly the end development stage of that Christmas and New Year drink driving campaign and ops order. I saw actually the email come in from soft drink partner. The designated driver launch will be mid-November, and we will be launching our, with the RSA, I think it's the 1st of December, we'll be launching the whole Christmas and New Year road safety campaign. I think my message is what it's been consistently. I don't think people don't set out to have a road traffic collision, and I think people think it's never going to happen to them. Our members see it firsthand when they go to the doors of those houses to tell people that their loved one has been killed. And just for everyone to, when they get behind the wheel of a car or vehicle, whatever you are, to concentrate on that activity. You know, it's one of the most, you know, it's one of the most serious things you do is driving. Don't be distracted, and I don't even mean by mobile phones. Don't be distracted. Other things can distract you. You know, don't be distracted. Concentrate on what you're doing. If you're driving, drive within appropriate speeds to the road and weather conditions. You know, we say it frequently. Roads, you know, the speed limit's not a target, but whatever the road and weather conditions you find, wear your seatbelt, and never ever get behind the wheel if you've consumed alcohol or taken drugs. We know those offences together are the offences that cause death and serious injury on our roads. You know, you want to be there for your family at Christmas. You don't want to be, you know, those families that will have that empty seat at the table. So think of one another, and for all road users, that we all have that responsibility, that we look out for one another, and whatever activity we're doing, it's a shared space, that we don't, and we really reverse this devastation that we're seeing on the roads.
Couldn't agree more, Paula. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, AC, and over to Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask a few questions about victims, and especially, I suppose, victims with vulnerabilities. Maybe if we could start off with the recent survey by the Public Attitude Survey, which again canvassed the views of victims in 2022. And I think there were some positives in that there were some improvements experienced by victims. So, for instance, a higher proportion said that they got a pulse number when they reported a crime. A higher proportion said that they got the details of victim support than the previous year. But in terms of adequacy of information, there were some figures that weren't as good. So the survey suggested only 43% of victims felt that the information that they got was about right. That was 8% lower than the previous year. 30% of victims thought the information was too little. That was a marginal increase on the previous year, 2% increase. And 26% said they'd received no progress report at all on their case, which was a 7% increase on the previous year. So in relation to that specific area of adequacy of information, there seems to have been a deterioration in performance. And I wonder, could you tell us how do you plan to respond to those findings?
Thanks, Paul. So you're quite right in the context of that particular area. While there were some positives in the public attitudes survey, in fact, quite a few positives across the range of questions, that particular area is a key area of concern for us. And so what we've done internally to try and unravel that and try and figure out, what's happening, why are the structures that we have in place not adequately meeting the needs of the victims? So so the Protective Services Bureau, our analyst service, and some operational personnel are working through that to try and figure out. Included in that will be, some focus groups with victim support organisations, trying to get their feedback in the context of, are there particular, categories of offence? What kind of information do they, would victims like to receive? The frequency of that, and indeed the means through which they will get it. So when we started out on this journey many years ago, pre the legislation, we were sending letters. We're still sending letters. So perhaps it's time to reconsider that. Yeah. Maybe there are other means of communication that would be more appropriate in the context of the evolution of technology and methods of communication since then. So all those areas are areas that we're looking at. We're also looking at shift patterns and how that might be impacting the transmission of information, the feedback loop, and all that sort of thing. And what, you know, trying to identify ways to bridge that gap, if there is one, in the context of a shift pattern or whatever being responsible or feeding into that lack of information flow. Our victim services offices that are in each division, and again, they were put in place on the run up to the EU directive setting out minimum standards for victims of crime. And they're staffed by one guard and one Garda staff member. And so we're looking at those as well, and have interviewed many of them in the context of, you know, what is their experience and how can we help them you know, gather that information, you know, better and more frequently and more up to date. And I suppose the IMS, which for all its faults and failings, the objective is that, you know, all the information would be in one place and accessible. So there are areas like that that we're looking at to see how we can make it better, but it's an area we're acutely aware of. We've invested a lot of time and energy and effort, and rightly so. We're obligated by law to do it, apart from it being the right thing to do. And, you know, it's... yeah, we're concerned that the direction of travel is in the wrong direction in the context of the victim experience.
Okay, thank you. And I suppose in particular, because some of this, of course, some of these questions might be viewed as slightly subjective, but I suppose the one figure that struck me as particularly concerning was the quarter of victims that said they'd simply had no update, so it wasn't too little or too much, it was just no response at all, and that had increased. So it'll be interesting to see, do your efforts bear fruit in the next
yeah. And I should also mention that, so our survey this year is a larger survey. It'll allow you know, focus into particular areas or divisions, so we'll be able to dissect that a bit further into context of, you know, are there areas that are more impacted negatively than others. So that's all part of the work that will feed into this. So the plan would be that we'll be in a better position to identify what it is we need to do and put systems and structures in place to do just that.
Yeah, and because one of the things that we picked up, not just here, where, you know, we met with some community groups yesterday, but in other areas that we visited, is the frustration that people feel when they don't get update reports on incidents of crime that they've reported.
Yeah, and we're acutely aware of that, because every crime, regardless of what it is potentially a traumatic experience, or an invasion of privacy, or what, you know, it has an impact on the individual. So for every individual, their crime is the most important thing to them. So, you know, we are aware, you know, we're conscious of that, and the importance of getting feedback. And sometimes it, you know, it may not always be, you know, a development or a positive development. It's just to say we're still working on that, or, you know, we haven't forgotten about you. So, and we've heard that ourselves through victim support groups on many occasions.
Okay, thank you. Just taking that a little bit further, in the engagements yesterday and in other areas as well, we heard very positive reports about the work of the DPSUs. One issue that was raised with us was that while engagement with vulnerable victims at the DPSUs was very good, because clearly they were well selected and well trained and they had empathy for the people that they were dealing with, but that sometimes that wasn't necessarily the case with the first officer to respond to the incident, who obviously isn't a member of the DPSU, is a frontline officer, etc. And I know that's a bit of a challenge, but how can the culture that's been engendered in some respects by the DPSUs, how can that be transferred more widely within the organisation to ensure that, particularly in those sorts of crimes that we're talking about, that the first guard to respond deals with the victim in a more empathetic way?
So I suppose this is very much a work in progress, and it's where the organisation wants to get to in terms of having that empathetic first response when the uniform guard goes. So a lot of work goes in terms of training, basic training, initial training, and there's an intensive programme of training. I think it happens in phase 3 of their training. When they've had the initial phase of training, then they go out for on-the-job training, and then when they come back in, having had a little experience of what life is like in the operational setting, there is a focus on victims, the vulnerable, sexual crime, domestic violence, all of those areas that are hugely impactful in terms of the victim and deserve and require an empathetic response. So that's one way we're trying to make sure that the first response is a good response. Side by side with that, then there are other elements of training, some of which are compulsory for the entire organisation. Some of those are in person, but probably more recently they're on the learning management system online, and I suppose that's a good way of reaching large numbers, in a relatively short space of time. And I know the representative bodies are very keen and very anxious that a lot of that training will be done in person. And in an ideal world, yes, it would. But there are competing demands in terms of training, and so that's another area that we're trying to, I suppose, manage our way. And then again, in promotion development courses, whether it's for the sergeants or the inspectors or up along the line, supervisors are important here as well in the context of driving standards and so forth. So it's very much an area of focus for the organisation, and so we would want every response to be a response like one would get from a DPSU trained person.
Yeah, and there is, I think, an ongoing review of DPSUs at the moment, and presumably that might provide an opportunity to somehow capture whatever has been done there, which, again, as I said, we get very positive reports in every area that we go to about the work of DPSUs. So it may be that something can be done there to transfer that knowledge to other parts of the organisation. But just in relation to the review, can you tell us a little bit about that? The review itself and any learning to date?
So the review involves the National Protective Services Bureau, the Garda Síochána Analyst Service, engagement with NGOs, in particular those that support victims and the vulnerable, and so I suppose one of the initial, while there are no findings, our final findings as such, but a bit like what you're saying, really the response from the NGOs in particular has been overwhelmingly positive. And I suppose if it were possible to expand the DPSUs, to larger numbers, I suppose that would be a desired state. But, as we have discussed and many times, we have a finite amount of resources. We have a large number of uniform and specialist sections to service. And so our commitment, I suppose, really to the DPSUs is the maintenance of the numbers, and while there will always be times through promotion, lateral movement, retirement, illness, in fact, numbers may dip, but there is a very strong commitment from the organisation to maintaining the numbers we have, and in some areas they have expanded over time due to demand, so I think it's fair to say that there's a very significant organisational commitment, and that is one of the things that has emerged from the review in the context of the establishment of the DPSUs.
Okay, thank you. I think finally from me in relation to this, there's also, I think, a review that's ongoing into domestic homicides. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and any emerging findings?
So I don't have any findings in relation to that. It's a process that's ongoing. I suppose it's, you know, domestic homicides has been the, I suppose, the source of most of our homicides from, particularly in recent years. Yeah. So from that point of view, it is an area of concern. And the victim-offender relationship work that has been done has, I suppose, brought to the fore the close relationship that there exists in many of the victims, between the victims and the offenders. And so we're now able to very confidently state what that relationship is between the victim and the offender, particularly, well, across a range of crime types, but particularly in relation to the homicides.
But I wonder, can you just say a little bit more in relation to both the rationale behind the review and what exactly the review is seeking to do? I mean, you're right. If you look at the figures of homicides over the last number of years, obviously partly because of the success of Garda Síochána in disrupting the activities of organised crime gangs and therefore reducing the number of feud-related deaths, the proportion of domestic homicides as a proportion of the whole has increased, but also objectively the numbers have increased over the last number of years. So it is an area of deep concern. But I'm just wondering, can you tell us a little bit more about why it was decided to embark upon this review? And I mean, what do you see being the end result of the review?
Well, I suppose that what we hope to achieve is to get a greater insight into the indicators that may exist, you know, in advance. You know, what are the signs that may have existed that perhaps we should have seen in the context of you know, the history leading up to the actual homicide. In some cases, there may be orders, you know, various domestic orders in place, in others not. You know, so we're just trying to get an understanding of, I suppose, the complex picture that is domestic violence, the hidden nature of it in many ways, and then, you know, in some cases, unfortunately, leading to homicide.
And sorry, what's the timeline on the review? Is there a completion date that's envisaged?
No, no. I don't have a timeline. You know, I mean, obviously we want to complete it as quickly as possible, but yeah.
Okay, well, perhaps we can revisit that when the review is completed.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Paul. And Moling is going to conclude this part of the questioning.
Thank you, Chair. In the short time remaining, my area of questioning is relates to your Q3 report on policing plan performance. And I think it's appropriate to again mention, which I've done before, is to commend the quality and extent of reporting, which certainly we've noted the change in the detail provided over the last number of years with the policing authority, which certainly significantly assists us in terms of a role of oversight. But just a couple of things, if I might raise. We did discuss much of it at committee level, but a couple of things, if I might raise. Firstly, the issue of resources. The issue of resources is identified as something which is significantly impacting on your capacity to meet the targets that are set out for the year. And one of the things that we discussed yesterday was that issue of the resourcing of specialist units, and at the same time seeking to maintain a high visibility in the individual areas. How do you manage that tension? How do you manage to to ensure that that you have the capacity to meet the demands of the specialist areas, the specialist units, and at the same time being able to maintain or seek to maintain a reasonable high visibility?
Okay, not an easy one, but I can tell you that it's something that's on the table all of the time in the context of how we divide our resources. As I've said already, we have a finite amount of resources. We have made commitments to various different specialisms, some which are long established, others which are new or newer, for example, the anti-corruption unit. So it's a constant challenge, to be honest, trying to manage, and trying to keep those national and specialist units sufficiently resourced in order to allow them to do their job effectively. And also at divisional and regional level, in the context of the ASUs, the Divisional Protective Services units, the drugs units, the traffic, and the crime units. So it's a constant agenda item, whether you're at divisional, regional, or national level. And I suppose at the national level, we have. We keep it, through our workforce plan, we can see where the gaps are, we can see where competitions are, we can see where retirements are going to be, where we can see, where there's applications for lateral movement and all of that sort of thing. So it's a very big jigsaw that we have to manage all of the time. In terms of the criticism, media criticism that you've got to face. The sort of regular assertion is that there isn't enough visibility, or that we see a car passing through our estate, and that there isn't that meaningful engagement which enhances the confidence of the population in Garda Síochána. How do you address that issue of confidence? So both Paula and Ray have already mentioned and referenced numerous different initiatives, I suppose, and ways of working. Everything from engaging with young people to the not so young, vulnerable people in the community. Paula spoke about the bicycles and the vans, and the being able to, when they'll be rolled out, they'll be effectively like mobile stations with the bicycles with them, so that there can be a patrol in addition to a static presence. So I suppose it's fair to say that that's a constant evolution, really, but it's also a constant challenge. And indeed, we got very positive feedback from Dáil yesterday in relation to your community Gardaí and their engagement with local businesses, and just in terms of walking around. And ensuring there's a presence there, but to some element is not quite associated with, but at the same time a resourcing issue, and that's your capacity to be able to fill specialist positions. It's a challenging recruitment market. There are areas that you see as absolutely essential in terms of your capacity to be able to deal with the challenges that are there. And at the same time, you have huge difficulty. An example being, for example, the legal specialists in your human rights area, an area that certainly the authority feels very strongly about, and that in turn has impact on other areas of your work. No, you're right. It is a constant challenge, and I suppose one of the, we have challenges, but also there's some green shoots in terms of our recruitment campaign for the Garda recruitment, and the numbers have consistently gone up over the course of the year, and we'll have another competition shortly, either late this year or early next year. So we're operating in a labour market that's full employment. There are lots of opportunities, and we're competing with every other sector for staff, and that's a challenge. But we would always say that working in Garda Síochána, whether you're a Garda staff member or a Garda, it's a great place to work. There's lots of opportunity for lateral movement, for progression if that's what you so wish, and it's a rewarding job. You're making a difference. Of concern is our difficulty in getting Garda staff, because that has many implications really. First of all, from that professionalising our service and getting specialists into many areas across the organisation. That's proving challenging. We're still getting some, and you referenced the human rights area. There are many other areas as well, from HR to finance to our chief medical officers section to analysts, cybercrime. The list goes on really in terms of our need for specialists in various areas. I suppose we have a lot of people on mobility lists, and they're wishing to move and progress and do different things. That's a challenge for us.
Yeah, we certainly understand that, and that's a huge challenge for you. But if I might maybe just go back to Garda members for a moment, the sworn members, and media commentary, huge amount of media commentary in relation to that issue, and some of it ill-informed. And certainly we're very conscious of the impact that COVID had on recruitment, and where recruitment was deferred, and the consequence of that is that the capacity of the Gardaí to get the numbers up to the anticipated or the appropriate agreed level is probably going to be another 2 or 3 years. How do you deal in the meantime with the shortage of the resources, the sworn resources, in order to meet your strategic and policing plan objectives and challenges and targets? Significant challenge at a national level. How do you deal with it?
So it is a significant challenge, and you'll see from our policing plan, our performance report, that we're not going to meet all our targets, and there is a reality around that. But I suppose we still have a lot of resources. I think it's important to say that. And I suppose it's how we maximise those resources. And there are a number of areas that that feed into that. One is the recruitment, the straight-up recruitment of Garda members. And you'll be aware in the COFBE report, the non-core duties, and there's a working group chaired by the Department of Justice, trying to help us, get to a space where other agencies or other sectors or other entities may take on duties that aren't necessarily policing roles. So that in turn then would free up Garda members. Equally, there are roles within Garda Síochána that it's possible for Garda staff members to do. We would like to see more of that, and that equally will have the positive impact of releasing members in the context of visibility and specialist sections and whatever it might be. So I suppose the solution is multifaceted, and recruitment obviously is the primary one, but there are other areas that feed into that and that will assist us in making as many members as possible available for core policing work.
A totally different issue arising from or coming out of your performance report, and that's the issue of pre-employment substance misuse testing in Templemore, and there's the reference to that. Could you share with us what is actually happening? What have you done? What has been the outcome of it?
So there's a long-term plan to introduce substance abuse or misuse testing. We're waiting on regulation for that. But in the interim, there is testing, pre-employment testing going on currently. It's only in place since September. And so it's too early to say what impact or what the outcome of that is going to be. There have been some technical challenges and teething problems with it, but I think it's an important development, and in terms of I suppose the message we want to send out to the organisation and
Do I-
would be applicants.
Do I take it that you've undertaken a significant amount of testing in Templemore on
Yes.
trainee Gardaí?
No, not trainee Garda. This is pre-employment.
Ah,
So
yes,
it's
okay.
pre-joining.
Okay, and what has been the outcome of that?
There have been some cases that have been detected. I don't have the numbers.
Yeah, okay. And your long-term objective is, as in number of employments that you'll have, that you have testing, random testing.
Well,
throughout the force?
maybe I'll bring Sean in here. The exact format of that hasn't been finalised. There's ongoing engagement with the staff associations, obviously, and then it's subject to regulation, and we don't have those regulations just yet. I don't know, Sean, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I just want to say that for the pre-employment, when the reference was made to, there's been some detections. It's a multifaceted approach. It's not a one and done. So we are very much working out what those details look like, and so we'll be able to give you more robust information once we're further down the track in terms of having done more testing.
That's great. Okay, thank you very much. I think time has beat me. Chair.
Thank you, Moling, and thank you, colleagues. Mar focal scar, Commissioner Maradur, may ag túsan crunathe táim de cúnta bhuio cúnta na bhfuil trí gaeltachtaí lonathe agus ar nó caiici seo hin nó brunach na dintúirí the Gardaí nua ar teampel mór ba ábhar áthas agus dóchas is dócha. Go raibh denúr in the mask gur muintir gaeltachta a bhí ionta atá ionta agus córóg sé sin leis an dúlgus rachtúil a cólíonna chun seirbhís a chur fáil trí gaelge ar na pobl atá ina gcónaí ins na ceantar go gaeltachta ar fud na tíre. As a final question from me to you, Commissioner, or to Chief Superintendent McMahon, as you choose. We're in Mayo, a county in which there are a number of Gaeltacht areas, and there is a formal statutory obligation on the Commissioner to ensure that people with sufficient fluency in Irish are assigned to those areas to provide a service to the people whose home language is Irish. And it was obviously a source of considerable satisfaction and hope that 10 of the recently attested Gardaí a couple of weeks ago in Templemore are Gaeltacht people themselves, and therefore obviously with fluency in Irish, and 2 of them were to be heard on TJ Cahar Nocht that evening, giving wordly evidence of that fact. Can you offer a reassurance or some comparable hope to the communities in this division for whom Irish is their home language, that in the Gaeltacht areas, that a service in Irish is available to them and will continue to be provided to them?
Okay, maybe I'll start and I'll bring in Ray then. So, yes, I mean, you alluded to our obligations under the Irish Language Act and also the Garda Síochána Act in terms of provision of service through Irish. And one of the initiatives we enlisted a number of years ago was the Irish language stream, and 8 of those members you referenced that passed out last week came through the Irish stream. 2 didn't. So all of those, so eight of the 10 went to divisions that have Gaeltacht areas in them. The other 2 went to the DMR. But I suppose it's also important to point out that our obligations under the Irish Language Act aren't confined to the Gaeltacht areas, albeit that they're more acute there. Like, we have an obligation to be able to provide a service in Irish in any part of the country if it was requested. So, and I think just important to say as well that while those 8 Gardaí went to divisions with a Gaeltacht area in them. They may not be in Gaeltacht stations now, they're in training stations, so they're still in their probationary period. And, you know, but in the fullness of time, that will all, you know, play out positively for the Gaeltacht areas. But yeah, no, so we were very delighted to have that number. And that will be a feature of our future campaigns as well, that Irish stream, because it is proving successful, and it is so important that we are able to provide that service in Irish in the Gaeltacht areas, and we're very committed to that. We have an Irish language strategy, an implementation plan, there are numerous initiatives, everything from the Cuasaí as Gaeilge that are in the various Gaeltacht areas to the wearing of the fáinne. We have 3 fáinnes, gold, silver and the cúpla focal, which is an invention of our own, but we're so conscious that so many of us have a lot of vocabulary but don't have the confidence potentially. So we just wanted to acknowledge that, and that has taken up you know, very positive numbers around the place. In addition to that, then, as part of Seachtain na Gaeilge, there are initiatives run by the college in the context of the students, and you know, I know the student cohort engage with that very very positively. So it's not perfect. We want many more, but it's something we're very, very much focused on. So I'll just bring Ray in the context of the Mayo division.
Yes, thank you, Deputy. I mean, our Gaeltacht area is really over the West Mayo, Belmullis, Glenamoy, coming down to Achill, and I think we're fortunate enough we have some very good people up over there, and some people, more people looking to get into it. So we have the luxury that we can be quite choosy, and I know on the board with the Deputy that we are insisting that people have the proficiency in the Irish language to go into those areas. So we're in a good position there to be able to make sure that we do have the right people going in to maintain the Irish language and keep it strong in those areas.
Thank you. There's a danger in broadcasting luxury that people may come like thieves in the night to take them to other parts of the country. Thank you, Chief Superintendent McMahon, and thank you, Commissioner. That brings us to the end of the meeting, and I simply want, on behalf of the authority, to renew the expression of appreciation to yourselves for being here and for the engagement today, to the community organisations with whom we met, and to Chief Superintendent McMahon and his colleagues with whom we met, and all those who work with him in this division, and to anybody else, and there were many who facilitated this in a whole variety of ways, in being able to be here for the last few days, not only to enjoy the soft, lubricated weather that can be provided, but also to get a much more complete understanding of the work that's being done, of the issues that are being dealt with, and of the character of the engagement between the Garda Síochána and the community as a whole, and particularly with the organisations who work with and advocate for and support people who have perhaps difficulties that many of us are privileged not to encounter. And as I said earlier, in the main, it has been an immensely positive and encouraging message and report card that we take away with us. There are, as always, shadows where there is sunshine, but it has been a very positive experience for us, and we thank everybody for the assistance and for the support that we've been given. So thank you very much. The meeting is now closed.
Too.